Yes, they certainly set Sunrise aflame.
We're good to go, Madam Chair.
But they did. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so do I start again?
Yes, please.
What time is it? The time is 7:02 p.m. on Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. I'd like to call this Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting to order. Before we go to the appointment of the vice chair, could we just go around the table and introduce ourselves? And as I said before, whether we've been on or not before and why we are. Allison, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Allison Hughes, and I've been a resident in Aurora for about 37 years, I think.
Oh.
So longtime resident. I am disabled as an adult, and now I'm a parent and have kids in school in Aurora, so have become more aware of accessibility challenges that I was maybe tolerating for a long time. And so that motivated me to join the committee 2 years ago.
Thank you. Good, great reason. So I cannot see, this meeting is being recorded. Lois. Hi, Lois.
One sec. There we go. Hi, I'm Lois Davies. Nice to meet you, Wendy. I have been an Aurora resident for 26 years now, and am on the committee I have a son with a developmental disability, so Special Olympian, but I've also been very dedicated to the world of accessibility in my employment as well. And so when I retired, I was able to serve in my community. So I am here now serving on the committee.
Great, thank you. John, you're next up.
John Lenchak. I've been in Aurora since '91. I'm a parent of a disabled child, so joined the original committee and stuck around ever since.
Thank you, John. Okay, who have I got next? Marilyn?
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Williams. I've been a longtime resident here since 1986. I have a vision disability, and I just had some time and I thought I'd love to get involved with the town.
Wonderful. Have you been on the committee before?
No, I'm new.
And Lois, are you new or have you been on the committee?
I was on last year.
Thank you. Okay. Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine Martini. I've lived in Aurora since 1989. This is my first time on the committee, and I'm really wanted to be on this committee to learn, educate myself more and see how I can help. I do not have someone in my life that has a disability, but I just want to educate myself more so I can teach others and see what I can do to work with it.
Thank you very much. Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne Spitzer. I've been here and owning my house in Aurora since 1969.
Ooh.
And I had a child with disability. And I also worked at the Ontario Society for Crippled Children, which now has become Bloor View down behind the CNIB. And I've worked with the Voices of Joy at the present time, which are intellectually challenged and physically challenged adults. And I've been with them for 25 years. And I just try to keep myself busy in the community, contributing to whatever is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Gertner. This is the second time I've been on the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I was pretty ignorant, I would say. And I learned a lot and was, for a short while, was in a wheelchair after a car accident and managed to get myself into a corner, and I couldn't get out of it. So that started me thinking about things that we take for granted. And it's a good committee. John and I have been on this committee. We were on the first committee, and I don't know if it was this committee, but my first committee. And the mayor has required that we change committees midway through a term. So my strength is really the environment, but at this point I've had the opportunity to be on every committee except finance, which is not my strength. And that's it, I think. Ashita, did I get everybody? I think so.
Yes, Madam Chair, you did.
Okay.
You can move along. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to have nominations. Nominations are open for the position of vice chair. It's for a 2-year period. Actually, it's really less than that because it's February now, and we generally, I don't know, do we meet during the summer, Greg?
No, we're off July and August. So we're
So,
back.
so we're back in September. So it's a little this, and I believe this committee continues through the election. So yes, then it is really a 2-year period. So would anybody like to nominate somebody, or would anybody like to nominate themselves? I don't see a show of hands.
Quiet.
We're quiet, folks. So this would be, if I'm unable to come, you would share the meeting, certainly with the help of staff and our advisor. So, and you could put it on your resume. Allison, do you need it on your resume? I don't think John needs it on his resume, but anyway, no. Okay, so nobody's nominating themselves. Would anybody like to nominate somebody else? Well, Ashita, would it be wrong for us to do it like they do with the mayor? Like we all take turns in rotation of being vice chair?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would be best if we appoint one person to be the vice chair. It'd just be easier logistically. And then at the same time, we would have to appoint everyone at each meeting if that is the case. So it would be best if we did it for a 2-year term at this point.
Well, I could nominate any of you. Joanne, would you like to be vice chair?
Not at the present time. I can't manage it right now.
Okay.
I don't mind doing it.
Thanks, Allison. That would be great. I don't think there's too much to do, but I imagine people often nominate you for stuff. So thank you for stepping up. Okay, so then we need a vote. Is that correct? So I need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Marilyn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Cue that. There, I know there are no opposed, so that carries. The land acknowledgement, which to me is very important. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship to that the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past have brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Let it be. May I have an approval of the agenda as circulated? If anybody's read the agenda and they'd like to move it and second it, that would be great.
I'll move it, Joanne. Will.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Elaine. Are there any questions about the agenda, about the approval of the agenda? No, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Declarations of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. I don't see any. And Joanne, I'm going to assume that you're a no on that.
No, that's fine, yeah.
Thank you. The receipt of the minutes. These are the last year's last meeting minutes of November 13. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive those minutes? Oh, we've lost you. Thank you, Allison. I'm sorry. Do I have another hand up? Thank you, John.
John.
Thank you, John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. No delegations, but we have Phil Rose with us, who is the manager of cultural services, Public Arts Strategy. Thank you for being here, Phil. We have to put it on the floor, right? The memorandum regarding the public arts strategy be received. Is that correct, Ashita?
Madam Chair, yes, so it'd be to receive and the comments be referred to staff for action as appropriate. So there are two clauses to that motion.
Okay, so we wouldn't do that now.
We can put that on the floor.
Okay.
On the floor, yes.
Thank you. I need more hands. This is just to receive the information from Mr. Rose. Thank you, Marathon. Ladies and gentlemen, this shouldn't be so hard. Okay. Is that your hand kind of up, John? Thank you. We won't do an all in favor until we've heard from Mr. Rose. Phil.
Good evening.
Good
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great at this end.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to be at your inaugural meeting. I didn't know that was the case, so happy to be here. In my previous municipal life, I was the accessibility advisor before, so I do miss that part, and so happy to be part of this meeting. I'm here just to let everyone know, as per the memo that was submitted, that the town is in the process of developing its first public art strategy, which is to be brought to council in April, I believe April 8th, if I remember correctly, at the Committee of the Whole. So this memo is simply advising that we're developing the public art strategy. It's been a long time in the making. We do currently have a public art reserve, but there's no policy and no framework or no plan to direct how the town directs those funds. So the public art strategy, as noted in the memo, is about identifying the process for creating, procuring, and procuring public art and where those public art projects will go. So for the purpose of this committee, we're simply advising you that as we implement the public art plan, and implementation will begin in 2025 if we have approval from council, and the public art plan will cover the next 5 years, so 2029. And we're just letting the committee know that we are committed to the belief in universal design, and that we want to make the public art process as inclusive and as accessible as possible. That includes from step one of identifying where public art might go to make sure it's in the public domain in an accessible location, but also ensuring that when we design public art projects and we select the artists that will be creating public art, that we will be doing that with an accessibility lens to make sure that artists of all abilities are able to participate, and making sure that we address any barriers there might be through the process. And I guess furthermore, we would just simply say that when we do community engagement, which is a big part of public art, creating public art, that will also make sure that those engagement opportunities are accessible, they're safe for community members, again, with all of all abilities. And then lastly, as we begin to create public art, so we're anticipating that our first official public art project will be created in 2026, that we will come back and consult with this committee as required to make sure that we are ensuring that all of the accessibility related elements of any future public art project are taken into consideration. That's essentially the gist of the memo. Happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. You're right. It's been a long time coming. Do you have any idea how much money there is in our public art reserve?
I do, Madam Chair. There's currently approximately $350,000 that's been set aside. And so we're recommending to council that we continue with the 1%. So currently it's a requirement through our official plan, but we'll also make the recommendation in the public art strategy that 1% of any major regional, municipal or municipal project dedicate 1% to the public art reserve. And those funds don't necessarily have to be spent on the actual development or within the development that's being created or constructed. It can be accumulated for a number of years, like this reserve has. And again, we'll come to council on an annual basis with a work plan of how we would like to spend the public art dollars on an annual basis. So roughly 350,000. The one caveat or the one thing I would note is that there was an approval in the 2025 budget of $60,000 to create exterior sports banners that will be going on the outside of the new Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex addition. And so that's, I guess that would be considered an unofficial public art process only because it hasn't gone through the process of that we're identifying in the plan, and the plan hasn't been approved yet. So I guess if you take that money out, there's approximately $290,000 to work with.
Thank you, Phil. And I voted against that, trying to save money in the budget, but I don't believe that anywhere in the report it said that it was from our reserve. So I'm pleased to know that. Are there any questions for Mr. Rose? Joanne, you're okay?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll be seeing you again then.
We will indeed. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And you expect there'll be something, well, in 2025 or 2026?
Madam Chair, we are anticipating that we're about 95%, 90, maybe even a bit more, done the public art strategy. So it's currently on the committee of the whole agenda for April 8th of this year for approval.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time, I know. And also, Mr. Rose worked very, 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 very hard. Shall I add another very, Phil? On the town square. So appreciate you coming to the meeting tonight, Phil, taking your time to come here. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. So now we would have a show of hands to approve the receipt of Mr. Rose's presentation. Is it just the receipt, Ashita?
So the motion on the floor would be to receive the memorandum and also to refer any comments to staff. But if there are no comments, then it would say that the committee had no comments or suggestions, but that would be the motion that's on the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, he was thorough, so I'm not surprised there weren't any questions at this point. Okay, all those in favor of that?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going on to what we call the matters of consideration. This is a site plan application that Greg is going to present to us. So you're on, Greg.
Alrighty.
Oh, excuse me, for those new people,
Uh-huh.
this is Greg Perry. I don't know if you've met Greg before, and he is our accessibility advisor. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, so I am currently our accessibility advisor. So you're going to be seeing me regularly at our meetings. So our first item here is a site plan application, SP 2024-09 for 28 Sunday Drive in Aurora. The process, and I'll just, for those of you, Joanne, I know you can't see our screen right now.
I've got my paperwork with all the pictures.
Perfect. So we'll go through page by page. There's about 6 pages here that we'll go through. So to start, I'll give an overview of the project itself with some pictures. We'll go through the site plan. And then once we've gone through the whole package visually, we will then go through the comments that I recognized. And then so I will speak to those comments. And then then I'll turn it over to the committee should the committee have any additional comments that they want to add, and then we can always add those comments to the memo and then resubmit that. So that's typically our process. To let you all know as well, sometimes deadlines for submissions will be prior to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So what we will do is I will pre-submit these comments, and then if there's anything additional, we will resubmit an update. If the deadline is after committee, then they will just be on the table for discussion. And then once approved, we will then submit it for the first time. So there could be both options for site plans depending on our meeting schedule and timelines. So that's just, I guess, a breakdown of the site plan process. Okay, so we'll get into this one here. So this is a Hyundai Genesis, a car dealership that is being proposed. And so here is a look of the overall site plan. And what we'll do is we'll zoom in a little on the left side here. So it's a big document, so it's going to take a while to load. So this is the overall view of the plan. It's a little tricky because there's different layers and different levels, including underground level. So it's going to be hard to see as we go through, but hopefully the grayed out areas is really what we're looking at mainly. So again, we have 2 entrances here on the north side, leading both into the different showrooms. They both do come down and join in together, where there mainly are the offices and meeting areas and that sort of thing. And then on the south side of the building, we have a service area where you would drive your car off the side and drive it in, or the staff would do so as well. And then on the far side is a car wash, which would be accessible to staff. All around the north, east, and west side, we do have parking. So here on the east side, we have the EV charging ports, and then some additional parking. On the north side here, we have our barrier-free spaces with access aisles, type A and B spots, and then the extra crosswalk for safety leading from the spaces to the main entrance. And that's in front of both main entrances. And then as we see on the left side, or the west side, again, there's more EV charging stations for their EV vehicles. Both sides do have service drive-through areas into where you can kind of pull in and then get out of your cars and access. And then there is a ramp, I believe, here that does go underground into the storage and underground areas, servicing areas. Next, we can kind of strip apart some of the extra stuff. So we'll get a little deeper in. So again, we're kind of looking at this area. My apologies. Just wants to jump around today. So this is kind of a breakdown of that service area underground from where it looks like. So we're going to have some washrooms, a lot of parts storage, vehicle delivery areas underground, and some service areas as well under here. As we move up floors, so we will have that main area. Sorry, that's the upper level. Because I've zoomed in, it's a little tricky, so bear with me here. Okay, so this is the showroom level that we were looking at. So we moved up a level, the main level. So this is where we're entering from the parking into the two vestibules. You'll have your showroom where all your vehicles will be. There's a lounge area on the one side. You'll have a bunch of offices that would appear here on the main level. We do have a barrier-free washroom. We actually have two beside the elevator, and then standard washrooms as well. They do all look individual washrooms, so they would be universal. And then we have stairs on the one side leading up, and then the main staircase, mainly that leads from the basement up to the main level or the showroom. And then as we move up a floor, we have more additional offices. There's the bull fence. So this is mainly the staff area. Again, the elevator would come out to here. All of this area is open. So there would just be the one mezzanine floor here, lunchroom, conference room, and all these offices would be mainly for staff, not for public. And then there is a proposed rooftop patio, which again, I'm assuming to be staff access, just because staff are on that main or that rooftop level. But then they do also have planting beds and gardens as well that are going to be up there on the roof. And then this is just the rooftop view, which is just, again, all the mechanical stuff. However, this is what the building will look like from the different angles. So again, it's tricky to see just based on the elevation and being that there are underground portions. But you will have your main entrances, one on Genesis's side and one on Hyundai's side. So that's kind of the two left and right sides. You do have your service bays both on either side as well. And as we look at the side, again, we're looking now at the lower level or the underground level, where would be more under the service bays where they would store a lot of their vehicles, work on their vehicles, and that sort of thing. There, and then this is the back view, which again, just be the back of the building, not really accessible to public, but more for staff to drive around and access those vehicles and that sort of thing.
It's Joanne here. May I ask a question?
Of course.
I can see different things in the driveways, and I find it difficult to see some of the things on these maps because some of them are so small and fine. But where is the accessible parking?
So if you go
Some
back,
people with accessibility of parking are going to pull up to maybe get a new car or whatever.
Yep. So if you look at page 4 of your package, that bottom right image would really clarify where those barrier-free spots are. So that's the main level. And then so on the north side of that parking lot, there's 4 spaces for one entrance and then 4 spaces for the other entrance. So that would be the location of those barrier-free spots. Based on the number requirements, they have actually an additional space than what is required. So they are.
They're right up against the building, are they? At the building?
No.
So they'll be on the other side of the building, and then there is a crosswalk that does cross to the curb ramp, which goes into the front entrance.
We ran into that before with another building many years ago, when we ended up asking them what was coming down that driveway, because the parking was across the driveway from the door, and we found out it was transport trucks that were coming down that laneway, and they had the handicap parking across on the other side of the laneway. The people would then have to cross that roadway And it's just that there's a lot of activity around this building, and I'm just wondering if it's put in a position like that at all.
Good point, Joanne.
Because I know before we had to ask them to change it
Mhm.
because it stood out like anything. So
It doesn't look like that here, but what, Greg?
Yeah, so again, the main traffic would be kind of coming from the east and west side into the parking and then coming off to the sides. All deliveries would be coming through the back area anyways. If you're picking up your vehicle, that's where you're coming down the middle here. So this is where they'll have the vehicles ready for you in that vehicle delivery section in between both showrooms. So that would be only really when you're picking up your new vehicle. And then so the main traffic would be off to the sides is what it looks like.
There's still going to be space for them to get across before they can get to the door.
There will still be space, yeah, crossing the roadway to get to the front doors. Yes, there's no parking that is adjacent to the building. All parking is a walkway.
Yeah. I don't think any of that's a very good idea. That means people have to get out if they have to get a wheelchair or something out of the back, and somebody has to put them in, and then they're lower, and if they go out first, the first thing that comes along would be a car, a truck, or whatever, a small truck or whatever, in that area. They would be the first person out because they're being pushed in a wheelchair. And I just think it's something that we had to look at before, and I think we should be looking at it again.
So again, as you mentioned, the previous submissions and the previous plans, they didn't have the crossings like they're currently marked here. So that was one of the things that we commented on. And the other one, like you mentioned, was transport trucks and larger vehicles. Again, based on this being a dealership, flow through the building would be, again, more to the sides than kind of right down the middle. And again, the larger trucks and transports would be coming through this side and the back, so away from the pedestrians.
That's maintained, because sometimes those things easily change with people deciding to change to a different location. And if it's not up against the building, that's a real concern to me.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to see if there's a better angle to see that. It doesn't look like it. But since we're here, so I just left this just to see the contrasts, again, of the wording and the sizing, to show that color contrast on that last slide. So that's the package as a whole. And so
is it something that can be looked into or talked to them about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can add a consideration to the comments about reconsidering the location of the barrier-free spot. Again, I think they've done I didn't comment on it originally just because, we've seen other spaces that have not had the provisions here. They have had A-B spots adjoining. They've had their access aisles. They are appropriate sizes and space. They also have the safety crossings just at the barrier-free spots, which is more than we've seen at other places and more than the requirements of the AODA, right? So I can add, again, a consideration for moving those spaces closer, and we can leave it at that to see what they say.
I think it would be a smart move, and I think it's appreciated by me. I know by me anyway, and I'm sure a lot of other people who have problems getting about.
I'd like to say that I agree with you, having a vision issue, because I don't have peripheral vision. So if there's traffic, it's sometimes difficult to obviously to see. So you're always depending on your hearing, and sometimes you hear more than probably more people would. It can be really nerve-wracking.
Yes.
Yeah. I have added that. Okay, so the other comments I have listed, and what I'll do is I'll read them and go show them on the screen as well. So again, it was unclear where the access to the rooftop patio came from. I thought it may have been down 3 steps into the stairwell and this little door leading out. That very well may be it, but it's not really clear. So I did ask that there is a barrier-free path to the entrance to that rooftop patio, even if it is just for staff. That is the first comment. There is, and as we go back a plan or two, there is, and I'll zoom in a little more. Hey, where'd you go? Accessible seating at both main entrances. So there is looks like a eating picnic area on the one side with some chairs and a round table on the other. And same, there's a park bench here and then chairs on the opposite side. So very similar furniture. Again, commenting on the seating to have accessible seating options by that main entrance. Standard items, as we can't see them on the plan, ensuring that all door openers are there for including proper timed door delays at all main and public access locations. And that's inside the building and throughout. Installation of proper tactile indicators at all the proposed staircases. So again, if we look at these, it's not showing that they have tactile indicators. Now it is an item as part of the building code, but since they're not there, we're going to add the comment there. And then 2 additional considerations. One, to have the customer service counter to have allocated accessibility spot in an induction loop. And then the second consideration for emergency evacuation chairs at all the different levels of the building. At those stairway locations, should the elevator not work, and individuals be either upstairs or in the basement to get out of the building. And those are the comments that have been submitted.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee members? Any other questions from the committee members? Sorry. I don't see.
Just take myself off mute. I get why the parking is where it is. I agree that against the building is preferred. I would take it a step further and say I'd love covered parking because weather makes accessible parking a nightmare, but I digress. I'm not sure if you just answered this. I apologize if I missed it. On the floor that looks like it's for employees, are those washrooms accessible?
It does not appear to be.
So I would argue disabled folks might work there. Like all spaces, they shouldn't assume that it's just customers needing access. So
exactly.
Same would go for office spaces and meeting spaces. You already addressed the rooftop patio. Having it, just tell them it's going to cost them more to retrofit for someone down the road. To accommodate a staff member is going to cost them more than to just do it.
Thank you, Allison. Any other comments? So I had a similar comment about the accessible parking, if there could be covered parking. And the other thing is trees. I can't tell, Greg, you know, cars can be so hot to get into in the summer. And if somebody, you know, is already struggling with movement or anything, would be really for the general population, but it makes it more difficult if you have an accessible issue. I would like to see some shade by the accessible parking. If you look at, I feel, Greg, put on the first picture.
Right here.
No, the picture of the building.
Oh. This one?
Yeah. So.
Oops. Yeah.
You can tell from this that they don't want anything right in front of the building because they want to show off their cars. So it is going to be a bit of a hard sell. I don't know if you can sell it. But it's wrong, in my opinion. With respect to staff, of course it has to. I mean, that's what I was thinking. And you said something, Greg. You said even if it's just for staff. Well, originally I was just thinking of it. I wasn't thinking of staff at all. But yeah, of course, it has to be accessible for staff. The washrooms and everything else has to be accessible for staff. And something, I don't think we can do anything about this, but it looks to me like everything, all of these mechanics are going to be working basically in an underground setting. Is that how this appears to you, Greg?
So we'll go to the first question since I have it here.
Okay.
These circles here with the kind of the pluses
Are the trees.
are the trees. Yeah. So the barrier-free spots would have one kind of in between,
Okay.
and then two. Now they're going to be just planted. So
They're
maybe when
gonna
they open
be-
the building, they'll be smaller, and then as the years go on, they'll be bigger. And then the second 4 spaces here kind of have one on either side, so providing that additional shade option. So that's what, I mean, at least is what's proposed. If we'll see when that gets built, if they're there. As-
I'm going to stop you because I speak to Gary Gardanis about this.
Mhm.
And the other, if you look at what's happened at Winners and HomeSense and the self-storage place, there are really, for the size of those developments, virtually no trees. And the trees that are planted in front of Winners HomeSense are these tiny little trees that some of them didn't even survive. So I don't know if you have to speak to Gary or the other gentleman whose name I can't remember at the moment, but this is a huge thing, and there has to be some green and some shade here. And I don't know if how you can sell it as accessibility, but do your best. Sorry. And on the other plan, it doesn't show those trees at the front. On the one where the building, the pretty one of the building, it doesn't show any trees in the front. So, I mean, how do we, like you said, if there are trees, like how do you know that there will be trees where the accessible parking spots are?
So trees is beyond the scope of accessibility advisory.
Okay, I'll speak to Gary.
However, what I have done, I'll
Thank
think
you.
outside the box here, is I added a comment to say we appreciate the trees by the barrier-free spaces too.
Woo. Good one.
So by saying that, hopefully they remain.
Very tactful. Thank you.
But I think that's the best we can do at this point. Now, that also contradicts moving the parking spaces towards closer to the building. The trees
Well, if they're
won't be
not,
there,
so
but-
maybe it could be if the spots are not,
Mhm.
you can wordsmith it, I think.
I'll do my best. But yes, I will
Mm.
ensure both comments are there.
Okay.
As for your other comment about service area, there is a large service area underground, but coming here to this one, it does say open to below. So the main showroom, there would be more of a 2-story. So although they're on the bottom level, it's almost like a 2-story
So there might be some
workspace. So it'd be all open above them. So they're not working in the basement, if you will. They're working on the lower level, but it's open to above. So it'll kind of be two stories tall is their workspace.
Yeah, I'll ask Mark about that because they're not going to want to show the mechanics working. So I think that'll be kind of covered.
Some
over.
dealerships do, and because while you're waiting, you can kind of see your car being worked on and have an idea of progress.
Okay, thanks.
I've been to some dealerships where it's all glass and you can see everyone working.
Wow.
So it again, whether this is a wall and just this 2-story on this side, or whether they put windows, there is some kind of acoustic separation. What that divide would be, it may or may not be open, but it does look like this is the main level, and it does say open to below, leaving me to believe that there is a
Interesting.
2-story workspace rather than 2 separate floors.
Thank you for that information. Could I just ask you, you said maybe I didn't get it right, A and B spots, or are they A, B spots? Is that?
Yes. So
Oh,
we have two typical barrier-free spots. One is considered a type A spot, where it's typically wider and has an access aisle attached to it.
Thank
And
you.
then a type B spot is a standard width parking space. And it's just labeled with a sign and markings on the floor as a barrier-free spot, but it doesn't always have an access aisle attached to it. And it's more of a standard width parking space. Type A spot is more van accessible, so it would be wider with an access aisle. So that's the difference between the two.
To the committee, was that in your understanding when you were making the comments about this? I really never heard of I always thought that barrier-free spots were larger than regular spots. So that this isn't, it's just somebody has to have the appropriate ID to park in that spot.
Correct. I'm just trying to find somewhere on these sides. They actually, I believe, maybe on the last page, I talk about the barrier-free spaces.
I just wasn't aware that that's how the barrier-free spaces were.
Yeah. So there is a percentage. So our parking bylaw does follow the parking standards for the accessibility legislation. And so there is a percentage up to, if I remember correctly, it's up to 12, you should have 1. After 12, up to 100, it's, I believe, 4% of the total spaces, rounded up to the nearest whole number. And then 100 to 200 or 250, it's 3%, 1 plus 3%, rounded up again. So depending on the number of total spaces available for public use would depend on how many barrier-free spots should be. And then half of those should be type A spots, which are the wider with access aisles, and the other half should be type B spots. And then if there's an odd number, there should be that extra type A space to round it out. So those are the requirements for parking.
Is that AOGA requirements or Town of Aurora requirements?
It's both. So the Town of Aurora's bylaw follows the AODA requirement.
Thank you.
There it is, the spaces. So 3.65 meters is the width of a type A spot. 2.7 is the width of a type B spot. So there's almost just under a meter difference between the two sizes. But then you have a 1.5 meter access aisle in between.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry. Are there any other questions? If not, we can make a vote to, I guess what are we doing here? Receiving.
I have a couple questions.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Go.
Greg, can you zoom in, please, on like the front entrance where the ramps are into the main doors? The one you're on, yeah, just zoom in a bit.
When you zoom in, you lose control.
I know, it's okay.
It's right there. Stop.
My question's just about the depth from the ramped spot to the sidewalk between the doors. So on the one side, like on my left, it looks decent between the curb cut and what I see as the sidewalk, I think.
There's about 3 meters on this side. 1.37. Yeah, so 1.5 to the end of the slope. 1 point.
From the building or from the end of the door? Like, I assume that the door's open. Do I still have clearance, or am I doing this from an angle? Am I making sense?
Yes. So it's from the building. So the door's closed. So from that building wall window to the end of the curb ramp is 1.5 meters. There looks to be 2 posts here, which then is from the post to the door or the wall would be 1.327 meters.
Like, that side looks not easy to navigate for me.
Okay.
I would question the posts and the proximity to the doors. If there's a post there and I have the door open, I'm gonna hit something.
Thank you. Good comment.
And then my other question is more broad, not just about this one. Have we talked about at other meetings, is there not going to be recommendations to change the parking numbers in future? Like, is that coming up with AODA? I know there's AODA recommendation changes, but I can't remember if you have intel on that being a future change. Would we, in good faith, say you may want to get ahead of the game instead of changing things later and have more instead of less?
Sorry, let me. Yeah, so I added your comment about the considering additional clear space from that entrance. In terms of parking, yes, so there were 137 recommendations for the design of public spaces that it was put forward. Parking had quite a few recommendations. Some of those recommendations, I mean, again, there was a lot, but they were recommending more, I think all type A spots, if I'm not mistaken. So removing the requirements for type B spots altogether, and an additional recommendation to increase the percentage of barrier-free spaces and change those requirements as well. Those would be the 2 main requirements, I think, Allison, as you're speaking to. I'm going to go into my update a little bit later. However, the town is going through a town-wide parking study, which we will be seeing as a committee next, probably towards the end of next month, if not early April, where the committee will have an opportunity to comment on. But it will be all town-owned parking and what we are going to do. So the study is more for town parking spaces, both on-street and off-street, and then how we use it and what does it look like and that sort of thing. But currently for private facilities, privately owned facilities, so any non-towned facility, they would have to follow the current AODA standard. Now, in saying that, those recommendations did ask for retroactive changes. So if those regulations do come into effect this year, next year, 10 years from now, whenever that happens to be, properties like this would be required to comply and therefore change their spaces at that time. So once it's in legislation, it's more of a must. However, in saying that, the 137 recommendations, including all of those that had to do with parking, were presented to the consultant for the parking study to be looked at and revised in anticipation for the provincial government to accept those recommendations and move forward. They don't have to accept them. Everything can stay status quo. However, it is an additional piece that I have asked that the consultant look at and revise, or consider, rather. We can't necessarily force that change to happen, as it's not part of legislation. And again, as part of this committee, I'm presenting basically all site plans that I feel would be relevant for comment and feedback. However, it's not really a requirement. As for the legislation, all town-owned facilities and properties would be something that the committee's comments would need to be taken into consideration for those properties. But these private ones, all we can do is recommend and consider some of our recommendations.
Thank you.
Which is why, as we talked about last term, and for those of you that are new this term, we've tweaked and changed the memo. So I don't know if you've had that copy, but on our copy we submit, and I'm reading it to you here. Please note that these comments are from lived experiences from the Accessibility Advisory Committee members, the Town of Aurora's accessibility design standards, which does go above and beyond, and is a recommendation for the public to adhere to, and of course the design of public spaces as part of the AODA. So I felt it was important that the lived experiences from this committee as members and as residents in town, as well as our accessibility design standards, which goes above and beyond the AODA. That's where a lot of these comments come from. So it's a lot harder for applicants and the public to see these comments and disagree with them when they really are coming from really your all lived experiences.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Good explanation. Any
answer your question, Allison? It was a little more, but
Allison, is there anything else you would like to ask? I think it's really important. I have in the past been able to change parking adjacent to a medical building, which I think is really important. But also, as the population ages, residential buildings, I think, will also need to take this into consideration more. I mean, we require very little in the way of accessible parking with respect to apartment buildings and condos.
So on that note,
yeah,
more background in education, the AODA doesn't really cover insides of buildings. It's mainly outdoors.
Right.
And so part of those 137 recommendations are looking at the interiors of buildings now, as more to do with residential, because currently AODA does not cover anything residential. So there are additional requirements for residential units, numbers, types, spaces, and then design as well. So there is a lot of, hopefully, good stuff coming. We just don't know when these recommendations are put forward and how long it's going to take to change legislation.
Mm-hmm.
But in saying that, the Accessible Standards Canada Act is Accessible Canada Act is looking at accessibility standards across the country in the next 10 years, 15 years, 14 years now, to make Canada accessible. And Ontario's already signed on through an MOU to say when this comes into effect, we will update our standards to meet any federal standards that might be different than ours. However, currently, Ontario is one of the highest accessibility standards across the country. And that's not saying a lot.
Joanne, can I ask something else to do with that?
Yes,
Sure.
you may.
I attend a medical building on a regular basis, which is just in the big lot west of the Shoppers on Bayview Avenue, and they have a ramp to go in the center of the building at the front. They have no ramp at the back, except they have one little tiny one down the corner because a lady that is the doctor there, she's in a wheelchair, and they've given her the rights to that parking. They have a fairly large lot for cars, and they've only got two parking spaces for handicap parking out the front. I did go to them when I first went there. I didn't say I was with any committee or anything, and I said, is there any possibility they could put a ramp by the back door? And she said no, they didn't think they could, because they actually have a corporate office in there. And but at each end of the sidewalk, which is down at the ends of each of the parts of the building, there's no ramp there either. And if you can't get up that curb, that means that you have to either wheel your wheelchair or walk with your cane or walk or whatever down all the way down the driveway, get to the front door. And it to me, it's a problem. And those things, they're not changing the building as such. I just don't understand why we can't ask them to put the ramp at each end of the sidewalk and that type of thing. But it's a real concern to me because they don't, and I watch ladies and older men and everything walking down there and walking out on the road, on the thing, because they can't get up until they get to the ramp. So I agree with you, it's a real concern, so.
Thank you, Joanne. I agree, and it's not, you know, John, I don't remember if you must have been on the committee, but we had to, the committee had to participate or was asked. So we had to, you know, be in a wheelchair, like use various, put ourselves in position of various disabilities. It was at the Aurora Community Center, and you know, you don't really understand. And maybe that's the same with everything, but until you put yourselves in somebody's shoes, and they don't, honestly, they don't care.
I have a cane. I have a cane
Yeah,
all the time.
I
I went
know.
to get some paint at the paint store, and
Yeah.
I said to the fellow, since I've got 2 gallons of paint, would you mind putting it in my cart straight out the front? And he's on Yonge Street.
Yeah.
And so he said, yes, that'd be fine. So he went to the door, and then he struggled to open the door for me with his 2 cans of paint in his hand. And
Yeah.
when I went out the door, I didn't say anything about the committee or anything, and I said, oh, an automatic door opener is probably good, eh? He said, yeah. He said, I better look into that, but he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, money. It's all about money, Joanne, but
Oh, I know it is. I know.
unfortunately. Anyway, I think we can vote on this now. Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor of the receipt of Greg's, sorry, what is it, a presentation?
It would be the receipt of the memorandum, Madam Chair, and also
thank you.
refer the comments to staff for action as appropriate. Yep.
Thank you so much. So I need a mover and a seconder for that.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Is somebody else raising? Oh, thank you very much, Marilyn. Okay. Okay, on to the next and maybe the most important part of our agenda.
Oh, you have to vote, Madam Chair. Sorry.
We have to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor? Folks, I'm a terrible chair.
Aye.
Thank you for bearing with me. That's the truth. Okay, so because I can't find it, actually, is there a way to put this script on the screen through? Anyway, could you just tell me what the next?
Sure. We are on the accessibility plan, so it'd be updates from Greg on the accessibility plan.
7.3.
7.3.
Yes, I can't pull up the agenda. 7.3. So we'll need a motion to put that on the agenda. And Lois, I think you were trying to second something before, so how about, thank you. And is that you, John? Okay. You're on mute, or is it me?
Oh, Madam Chair, I think Allison put her hand up to second that.
Thank you, Allison. All those in, oh no, we're not doing all those in favor yet. So we're getting a pretty comprehensive update on what's happening with our pending, with our accessibility. What do we call that officially?
Multi-year accessibility plan.
multi-year accessibility plan. Thank you. So would you like to go ahead?
Absolutely. Alrighty. So it's been a while. So this is a just let the committee know this is a standing item that we will have at all our committee meetings, and this just gives us an opportunity to discuss some of those multi-year accessibility plan items that are being worked on. There are actually quite a few things from when the plan was first established that we are doing above and beyond the plan, which will appear in our next plan. And so as part of this terms committee, you will all be involved with creating our next multi-year accessibility plan, which will be from 2027 for the next 4 years after that to 2031. And we'll typically keep our multi-year plan in line with the term of council. So this committee will create it, and then the next term of council will start, and then we'll have a new accessibility advisor committee, and we'll start to enact that plan moving forward. At this point, since we haven't met since November, there's been quite a bit going on, so bear with me. I will pause after every topic just for a brief second. If anyone has any questions, feel free and ask for those items, but if not, then I will just move on, as I do have just about 2 pages of items to go through. So we'll get started on probably one of our big initiatives that we typically do annually, which is National Accessibility Week. This year, 2025, National Accessibility Week is typically the last week of May. That the really nationally, we look at activities or education or whatever we want to do for National Accessibility Week to really showcase accessibility. This year, what we are planning is a week of parasport activities and sports, as well as sensory program throughout the week. So I am working with community programs and our sport and community development coordinator, as well as our local sport contacts that we have from Para Hockey Ontario, para sports, Special Olympics, and that sort of thing. And we're reaching out to our contacts to see what we can do for Try-It Days. So we already have a week of gymnasium and rink opportunities booked for the week. They are varying throughout the week from the Sunday straight through to the following Saturday. And so we're also looking, so last year we started for National Accessibility Week, a video series for our community. And the one thing we also wanted to touch on was aspects of our town and the importance of accessibility and how they fit into the work that the town is doing with our community. So last year we had one of our staff, Meredith, talk about the importance of employment and how the town is looking at accessible employment. And then we also had a former member, Max, talk about accessible trails and why trail accessibility is important in town. And that video actually kicked off, both of them were launched during National Accessibility Week, but that kicked off our Access Now trails assessment, where we spent throughout the summer assessing our trails, which I'll get to in a little bit later. So that is the plan for National Accessibility Week. We did apply for a grant and we were unsuccessful. However, we are still planning the activities that we had planned, not to the scale that we originally had, but a lot of the activities that we originally had, we are still planning to do. And again, this is going to be run by community program staff, so our program leaders and our inclusion camp staff as well as Haley in sport and community development, and all of the work that she's doing with the update to our Aurora's sport plan, which I'll also get to in a minute. Any questions on National Accessibility Week?
May I just ask one question, please? It's Joanne.
Yep.
Do you, when you're doing this and you're working with different groups in the community, do you work with community living?
We have just started our conversations and reaching out, but because this is mainly to do with sport, Haley is reaching out to her sport contacts, para and special sport.
The Voices of Joy that I'm in, they on a regular basis, quite a regular basis, numbers of them get up to say they've been bowling, doing something else, playing some other kind of ball or whatever, and they've won stuff and everything, and they're so proud of it. And I was just thinking that they might have some other things that would add to it, That's all I'm thinking.
Yep. So I've noted it down. So again, we just started the conversations. I provided again the support for this, really working closely with the two groups there, and really leveraging their contacts in our community for that. There's some other projects we'd like to accomplish based on getting them in here. And I was chatting with Haley actually today about some of the initiatives that she was looking at as part of the update to our Aurora Sport Plan, which was presented last night to the Committee of the Whole. But Joanne, I have added community living to contact them, and I'll pass that information off.
I worked for them for a number of years too, doing donations and stuff for them. So I've had that connection too. But the thing is, I've always had it in my place, my background of, trying to work and do all these things. So if you ever need me, I would love to sit on anything else that you're running for that type of thing,
Sounds good.
Thank you, Joanne. Greg, are there other updates?
Yeah. I was just seeing if there's anyone else had any other questions before.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the Aurora Sport Plan update. So again, that was presented last night at the Committee of the Whole. The consultant did come and present it to our councillors last night. It hasn't. I think it's going to council next week, if I'm not mistaken, or the week after.
Week after. So 2 weeks. But it was heavily focused on DE&I and accessibility in sport. So that was kind of built throughout the plan, really focusing on the supports for individuals in our community and accessible sport, and how not only can sport be accessible or available to individuals, but also to look at and focus on parasport and our community groups there. And again, so the Committee of the Whole did endorse those recommendations that were contained in that sport plan. But again, it is going to council in a couple of weeks before it is proceeded. So there's just a small update there that's for this committee. Any questions? Okay. So a few updates, and I believe I emailed you all last month, if I'm not mistaken. The Yonge Street multi-use path did go for public consultation back on January 14th. And this is a stretch of road on Yonge Street from Bloomington straight up to Industrial Parkway South. So right before that Metrolinx bridge. And there were multiple options for this multi-use path and what it would look like, whether it's a sidewalk, whether it's a multi-use path, or both, whether it's on the west side and or the east side. And on the west side of Yonge Street, there will also be trail connections to the new trail that is going there throughout the back of the houses and that sort of thing. And I believe I emailed you all a link to kind of take a look at the project. I was in attendance on the 14th. There was only a handful of questions, not very much. There were quite a few people that attended, but a handful of questions talking about walkability and safety
seating along those multi-use path, and just a handful of accessibility questions. Not a lot, but if it is a multi-use path, there will be seating at the trail connections, and we've already committed to having that attachment. But just due to the nature of the path, there won't be rest areas or seating along the path throughout that distance. On the east side, there is the cemetery there on Yonge Street that there's a challenge with. So there's a consideration north and south of the cemetery to have sidewalks or a multi-use path, or find a way to go right through the cemetery, as there's quite a steep hill there, which will pose a challenge. So those are just the different options that were discussed. And once finalized, of course, this will go through approval. And I mean, Councillor Gardner, you'll probably see it at council or committee of the whole at some point. But that's just an update on that Yonge Street path. One of the items there, this was actually my very first complaint that I received when I started here, just over 2.5 years ago, from the residents that live there about no walkability on Yonge Street, through those new subdivisions in that area. So here we are, which is pretty cool, coming full circle to being involved with this project. So, side note. The other public consultation that I had on the same email was the Fleury Park update, which again went to public consultation the day after on the 15th. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that one. However, they are looking at relocating, building a brand new playground much closer to the parking and the washrooms. And so completely moving it all together, which would have additional accessibility features, not quite to the town park standard, but much more than our typical park. We'll also be building a splash pad near that playground, and re-looking at the parking that's adjacent to that space. Where the park is currently, there's a tennis court. That tennis court will remain, but additional pickleball courts will be built with a new shade structure in that space. And throughout the whole park will be additional or new art features that will appear throughout the park as well. So again, information can be found online. I believe once we have a better idea of what that park will look like, this committee will see concept drawings, and then we'll be able to provide comments directly to the Parks Department, as we did last year with Town Park. Very similar process with Fleury Park upcoming. So when I get more information, I'll ensure that the Parks Division comes and speaks to this committee on that.
Thank you.
May Joanne ask another question?
Absolutely.
Joanne May.
If I get my all my paperwork as paperwork and I pick it up at the town offices, I just wondered, in that case, I wouldn't have got what you sent out about that business down Yonge Street. So is there any possibility that if there's anything like that, that I can get it also and pick it up at the town offices?
Did you receive the Fleury Park did you receive the Fleury Park?
No, I didn't.
None of that. Okay.
I saw what the town put in.
Okay. It may have been missed because I believe for you specifically, Joanne, there was quite a large package you were coming to pick up, and I believe the accessibility training was also included in that package, which is around the time that these two did.
That?
So you got
I can have another, but I didn't see it, I don't think. So, but
okay.
Anyway, I'll have another. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it should have been part of that package. But if you didn't receive it, then absolutely just let us know, and we can print a copy for you.
Okay, it's just the Yonge Street one. I've
Okay.
seen the advertisements about the Fleury Park, but I haven't seen anything about Yonge Street at all. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries. So moving on to parking. and I know I commented on it earlier in the meeting. So two things. One, back on January 30th, staff did hold a meeting, which I was part of, to create the scope and the RFP for the project for the Aurora Recreation Complex parking study. So this study, again, is just looking at the use of the space, both future use, current use, and re-looking at designing what can we do. What's not part of the scope here is a complete re-renovation. So we're limited to the bounds of kind of currently how the parking looks. But for the most part, there's some infrastructure underground that needs to be fixed and updated. And so as part of that, we're kind of repaving and doing that work. So there's going to be minor changes that we did suggest and did look at. So a few of those that I did comment on. So the biggest competition and the challenge that was faced, again, with the comments that I brought forward for barrier-free and additional parking spaces, was the fact that there's a lot of competition for that lot, even though there's, I believe, close to 300 spaces in that lot to begin with. It is still heavily used and a lot of competition seasonally, with the arenas for hockey. There's 2 pads there. It's very busy, along with the skating, and now with the gymnasium that's being built there, it will be much busier of a parking. And then in the summer, with the ball field, the ball diamond, and the overflow of the soccer field and the tennis courts, they're all parking on that north side of the lot. And then there's also talk of future development going on that may impact the use of that parking lot as well, that we're all taking into consideration. So it's kind of we're taking all these feedback into consideration. Now, what can we do with that parking? So that is where this scope is looking at. So some of the things that I did comment on specifically for those that have attended the Aurora Recreation Complex by Leslie and Wellington, the rec complex there, will be, first of all, we need an increase in barrier-free spaces. Currently, there's only 6, and I believe we require at least 9 to meet AODA standards. So at a minimum, we do need more spaces, but the current spaces are all type A. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. There's no access aisles, but they are much wider than the typical spaces. So we are looking at how can we relocate and repurpose the barrier-free spaces towards closer to the front of the building, rather than that 6th space being very far away from the building. Also additional options. So currently there is no barrier-free parking spaces on the north side of the building, of the parking lot rather. So for anyone trying to access the ball diamond, there is no barrier-free spaces for them. So we are looking to add some barrier-free parking on the north side of the parking lot, both on the east and west side. So, and also aligning with, we are also looking at increasing the number of EV parking spaces on that north side of the lot, but also considering a barrier-free EV parking space on that north side of the lot. Again, it's far away from the building entrance, but it is closer to the tennis court and the ball diamond for those that are accessing that space. So again, those are the main considerations. The other thing we commented on was the current unofficial drop-off area. Because everyone uses it as drop-off area, it's mainly the fire route. That's kind of that little injet from the current curb ramp that goes into the main building. But we are looking at portioning that off and adding curb ramps to that side of, so the south side of the entrance, in that big kind of open area. Again, not only for pickup and drop off, but also if those parking spaces are going to be moved further south, so closer to the islands or the medians, that we will have curb ramps closer to those spaces than having to travel to the current ramp. The other thing I commented on was similar to the last application that we saw, having those safety lines or those cross lines in that main curb space. So where those barrier-free spots are leading again into the front of the building. In a place like this, again, very similar to the comments we listed previously. We don't have the ability to put barrier-free spaces adjacent to the building. So this is the next best thing, to have that crossing marked on the floor. Again, a higher contrast, but also to denote no parking in this area, as people tend to park in that walkway area as well. So some updates there. Again, one of the challenges with that is there is infrastructure underground that does regularly need to be accessed. And if it needs to be maintained, we're pretty much tearing apart that space, which is why the ground does look a little different in that space for those that have been there recently. So that is just the SARC in a nutshell, which is separate from the town-wide parking study that we talked about. So as I mentioned, public feedback will be coming. Once I hear from it, again, it will be on Engage Aurora, similar to Fleury and Yonge Street. And Joanna will make sure you get a copy of the information as well. But then it is really looking at that parking throughout the town, both on-street parking, which currently the AODA says, let's bring it to the AAC for recommendation. It's very vague on the requirements. So we are looking to add requirements as part of this parking study on our on-street parking. And then off-street parking, we are part of the project of looking at it. Again, this is for town-owned off-street parking. So this is not covering any privately owned facilities, doctor's offices and you know, Walmart and that sort of thing. We're not touching those. This is mainly for our own parking, but also looking at parking time limits, parking requirements and fees and that sort of thing. So it's all encompassing here. Accessibility is just a small portion of where are we putting them, how are we putting them, are we putting them, and how many throughout town are we putting these spaces. So that's kind of that piece. Our parking bylaw, AODA, does cover off-street parking a lot. But that's about that. Any questions on parking? Okay.
I have a question. Did you just mention the word fees?
We are looking at, part of this parking study, if I recall correctly, will be parking along Yonge Street, time limits along Yonge Street, and also looking at, I think we're the only municipality that doesn't have
Parking meters?
parking meters on town property. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Richmond Hill, we were looking at a program in Richmond Hill. If you're a non-resident, you would have to pay to park in a rec complex just to use their space.
I thought you were, so we're talking about Yonge Street and possibly a rec complex.
And all our other parking, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is kind of all encompassing. It has bylaws involved, engineering's involved. And again, on my end, it's more of like, we do have a few on-street parking spaces, mainly around the library. So we do have a couple of spaces on Mosley, just north of the library, and then adjacent to the library, we have 3 parking, and they're a little off, they're a little cut out, but by town square, by that the outdoor space there, then closer to the front of the library. The challenge we'd have looked at Yonge Street, on-street barrier-free, just due to the nature of it being Yonge Street and the width of the street. It's actually a safety consideration to not put barrier-free spaces there. However, as we are looking at that whole Yonge Street corridor and the downtown core, it is something that is a consideration should we, when we, because that is also coming, do road work from Wellington down to Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken. We will be re-looking at what Yonge Street looks like, and that is part of the conversation to potentially widen the road and therefore potentially have on-street barrier-free spaces on Yonge Street. So it's a top of mind, it is a consideration, but currently cannot. It's just not safe to do so.
And I'd like to say before we finish this, that one of your accessibility advisory committee members, when we were planning the town square, was very vocal about accessible parking. And I would say we didn't listen to him. So let's see what we can do this time around. I'm talking about to you, James Hoyes.
Oh, yes.
Which I supported, but
I can't comment on that. I was
no, and you shouldn't. But we've tried, so we need to try again.
So the one thing I can comment on, the on-street parking, there is I want to say 2 or 3 spaces right by the library. Again, there's one closer to the library, but one farther back, closer to the ramp that leads down into the square, in town square. And then on the other side, they're actually the front of the building. So the main entrance to town square, on Victoria Street, there is quite a few, 3 or 4 type A. So those wider spots with the access aisles that are adjacent to the building. So they lead right into the front door. And then off to the side on the parking lot, we do have additional barrier-free spaces there as well. So again, we are above the AODA requirement in terms of numbers. But in terms of the comments, I'm not aware nor.
No, and I was referring to, we took some away from next to the library, and that was part of it was relatively easy. There was I guess a lane and some barrier-free spots right against the east side of the library, and that is gone. But it's the whole area is short on parking, and therefore maybe in that area that you're talking about, yes, we're okay, but we're not okay in other areas in that square area. Thank you. Is there more?
I'm on to page 2. So
Can I ask a question?
What?
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When we're looking at redoing Yonge Street, we always talked about the businesses, I think, on the east side that are not accessible at all. You have that huge step up.
Right.
Will they be looking at that elevation as well during that, or is that feasible?
So it's something that they are aware, we are looking at. However, again, with engineering and the technical stuff of really everything to do with slope and drainage and the roadways and snow clearing, and there's a lot to consider. I am hoping that we can find a way to make those buildings accessible. It has been brought up, but until we get a full design of what that's going to look like, I technically I won't know what that's going to look like. But from an accessibility perspective, my push will be as much as we can. We're going to try to make all those businesses accessible to help them out. We have this opportunity. Let's try our best. But again, if we can't, it'll be because of technical reasons. We can't have a super steep slope up, down, just to make them flush, because a lot of those buildings, some have stairs, some don't, some are already level. And those buildings are not going to be part of the scope. It'll just be from the sidewalk into the roadway, not the actual building itself.
But we might be able to have ramps.
Again, it depends on what the sidewalk looks like, right? If we're pushing the roadway, making it wider, we're losing sidewalk, which would eliminate the fact to put ramps. But if we're shrinking the roadway and making
it's complicated,
right? Yeah. So all I could tell you, and for those I think new with the committee, and for those that have been on the committee in the past, no, I will push as much as I can, as I can, the best that I can. But sometimes I will lose out to technicalities, to legislation, but I will always push to do the best that we can. And if that means I have to put myself in, talk about in a minute with our trails, our assessments, and share kind of the challenges that I faced personally, then I will share those challenges. But I will do my absolute best to make all of those businesses accessible. I would love to see that. And I already know, like, some of those businesses have 5 stairs up, and the one right adjacent to it has 1 stair in.
Okay,
So
well,
how do we make them both accessible when they're right next to each other? You know, that's going to be a challenge. But again, when the time comes, we'll see what we can do.
thank you. Lois, did you have a question? No. Okay. Okay, continue, please.
Moving on. All right. So I talked about Access Now. So for again, those that are new here, 2023, we embarked on partnering with Access Now to assess for accessibility our main facilities. So we did it back in 2023. We did basically all our town publicly owned facilities. Obviously, Town Square, the library were all under renovation during this time, so we didn't cover those, which was part of this one. But we did all our rec complexes, Town Hall, the Senior Center, the Joint Operations Center. One other one, I'm missing one. In any case, the Aurora Community Center. And the Pet House, actually, that was the other one. So the little Pet House behind the Aurora Senior Center, we also did. So we assessed all those facilities. Access Now is a worldwide company. They're based out of here in Toronto. So they're a Canadian company, but they map and assess on their app. They also have a web platform, the functional lived experience accessibility of facilities. So they do bring individuals with disabilities that are also experienced in assessing. So our one mapper who uses a power wheelchair was also certified in accessibility assessments through Rick Hansen and has done this for many, many years. The other individual, similar, who was blind and used a cane as he came through half of our buildings. They brought him in from Ottawa as well to experience our facilities as well. The second half he wasn't able to come, so it was just our mapper. I attended all our assessments there. We were verified on our platform. Then last year, so we put a capital project together to do assess all our trails. So all throughout last year, council approved a capital project to assess our trails, close to 800 meters, if I'm not mistaken, of trails. There was quite a bit of walking and traversing that we've done, but we went through every trail that we physically could get through throughout this summer. So that included David Tomlinson Nature Reserve, Tim Jones, which included the Arboretum, all our boulevard trails, which were mainly the regional trails. So up and down Bayview would be considered a boulevard trail. Shepherd's Bush, Conservation, the Oak Ridges Trail, mainly the Case Woodlot area, Klaus Wernberg Trail on the south side of Tim Jones, Highland Gate, which is new. There's a second part of Highland Gate, which we're going to get to next year, or this year, sorry. Flurry and Matchell, pretty straightforward. Butternut Ridge Trail, again, the new one where the multi-use path is going to be. We'll have an additional trail entrance there. And then the trio, Willow Farm, Lakeview, and Whitby Trails were all assessed. So we virtually went through all our trails that were open that we could. Some were late in the season. So it was a very different experience from early summer when it was hot, but a lot of canopy cover, to fall when it got much cooler and we couldn't see the trails due to the coverage of the leaves on our trails. So a very different experience, and that did skew some of our results. However, we did receive all of the assessments back, just about 3,600 pages of them to be exact, to review both comments and pictures and everything in between. And so the team at Access Now are currently working on getting those live. What we will end up seeing with our trails is actually, I may be able to pull it up. Oak Ridges did something similar. So let me see if I could pull something up for you while I speak. But what you will see when you're live is 3 colors, basically green, yellow, and red. Green meaning it's accessible, yellow meaning it's partially accessible, red meaning non-accessible at all. So what we'll also see is features. So if there's certain features or amenities or that sort of thing, trail entrances, all of that would appear on the map. So for your knowledge, okay, I got 15 minutes cognitive of time. I'll leave it to there to see if anyone has any questions. So this year I did table the project to now expand that project into all our playgrounds and all our parks. So it'll be a 2-year project, which we will be looking at all our playgrounds, all our parks in town. We're going to start this year with our larger ones, mainly our playgrounds, and then next year move into our medium and smaller sized parks and playgrounds to get all of our town assets verified on the platform and assessed for accessibility. So I'll leave it at that to see if anyone has any questions.
It's a lot of work.
It was.
Are there any questions? I think everybody wants to go home, Greg. Oh, everybody is at home. Everybody wants to.
So I'll share this. So this is kind of what it would look like. So this is again a Richmond Hill Trail, Saigon Trail. You'll see a map of the trail. So a nice green line here, and then around here it will convert, and then so there'll be a picture associated with that as to why. So there'll be the width shrinks. You're moving from pavements to a different texture on the floor, which is why this now turns into yellow. So it's now partially. And then anything you see in red, like this park bench here, would just be an amenity. This is an inaccessible park bench that you can find. So now, when we're saying that, that doesn't necessarily mean it's inaccessible for everybody. People can use these features. So the idea behind the platform is you can go on there before you go to a certain location. You can kind of look at what are the amenities, as somebody with a disability, can I use this space with my disability? And if the answer is, it just helps you to make an informed decision before you actually travel to that location. So if you want to make access to our trails, for example, you might see, you know what, maybe I can park here by Tower Hill, get into this area of the trail, and I can actually go this far before I might have a challenge on the trail itself. So it really helps you to make those decisions. And we do consider all disabilities when we're going through this trail as we do. So that's just a little snapshot as to what it will look like once Aurora's on the map, if you will. And then our playgrounds would also be the same.
Thank you. And we'll know where to put more accessible seating.
We absolutely will. And where to fix the current ones.
Yeah, that's really important. It's a lot of information.
A few more things. Almost done, I promise.
Okay.
So site plans. So we just saw one for this year, but last year, so just to give an update, we did look at 131 total site plans for 2024. So that many came across my desk. Not all of them required comments from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, but there were majority of them that did provide some commentary or at least were reviewed for accessibility. A handful of them were just people building their houses in their backyard or whatever the case is, a shed, a pool. Some of those were just minor changes to their current businesses, adding a doorway, that sort of thing. So not really things that this committee needed to really simpler in nature. But again, just at a high level. Last year, for International Day of Persons with Disability, which happened at the beginning of December, we did administer an AODA refresher training. Now, we did issue it to all 642 staff, so all full-time, part-time, and contract staff, not just our full-time complement, so quite a bit. Now, we did have some challenges with phishing, and there's been a lot of scams and phishing, and the email that did come through was through Citation Canada, and so some staff were worried about clicking the link to do that training, but we did communicate. In effect, we did have over 30% of our staff complete training. 30% doesn't seem high, but it's just about 200 staff, which is the majority of our full-time complement, and a handful of a part-time complement as well, which is impressive. So it is a large number, but also we did have a large completion rate as well. And I'm currently in the process of reminding staff that didn't complete it via email to do so as well. So finally, Town Square. So just a few updates here. Nothing, I'll say a few updates. So we recently did install our listening device at the customer service desk. So that was not part of the scope of the project. And so we did go out. I worked with IT. We did install the listening device there. So it's already installed in the performance hall, which is upstairs. And there is an additional unit that can easily be moved around from room to room. But we put a permanent listening device at the customer service desk. And they were taught and trained and created procedures on that, which is great. I'm currently in the process of purchasing just a standard wheelchair to assist public for mobility, should they not be able to move, go through that building or the longer distances. There's not much. The seating is periodic throughout, but there is a long stretch where there is no seating. So just like all our other recreation complexes, we will have that option for public should they need. And one of the third things for anyone who may have tried to go to the performance hall during the grand opening and maybe recently, you may have seen a little difference. And that has to do with the accessibility seating that was on the platform that has now been removed. And a comment that says, if you require accessible seating, please contact the business support team. So I did chat with the team on that as to why. And there was many reasons as to why they made that change. The biggest two reasons. One was the nature of the program that they use. Red 61, I believe it is, that structures and sells those tickets. Is very limited. So once you kind of build out space, you can't modify or change it. So if you needed less or more accessible seating, you wouldn't be able to add or subtract. Kind of what you build is what you build. They went to, we just put in the full row, but then staff were finding that during the sold out performances, people took advantage of those seating and ended up booking those seating, and those with disabilities couldn't actually get in to book those accessible seatings. So there were quite a few reasons as to why. This process then ensures that staff, and I have reviewed, they have about 3-page questionnaire depending on your disability to try to ensure the appropriate supports are available for individuals when they arrive. Some individuals with disabilities can get to the top or can get to seating. They may need a listening device. We can ensure they are available when they arrive so that everything is ready, set, straightforward for their arrival. We don't have any complications. We can make sure everything works. Elevators work, that sort of thing. I was at Town Square, the library today for a training. The front elevator didn't work. It worked yesterday, but not today.
Oh, no.
So within a couple of hours, it got up and running. So it was a quick turnover, which was great. But again, this just makes sure we know you're coming. We can make sure that everything's working and available. And that's the team. So again, I just wanted to provide that update. Should you see that on the webpage, that's basically the rationale behind that. And that is all my updates.
Thank you.
I promise.
Good updates, a lot of work.
Joanne, may I make a comment about the seating?
You may.
I won't keep it long here. I go to the Richmond Hill Curtain Club, and they don't have reserved seating. But they do make sure that the seats at the front are marked, just at the front row. They're marked that they're for accessible seating. And they'll says right on that you'll be asked to move if somebody needs the seat. So the people, it's really quite funny because you'll see people that are back a couple of rows say to somebody, would you move out of there because there's somebody coming in that needs that seat? And the people in the audience do it. But anyway, they've had it for years and years and years, and it seems to work quite well. So because they go upstairs from the front row, they go upstairs to the seating. So, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that. So.
Yeah. So due to the nature of the performance hall, you know, and the ticket, there's many different options of what you can see from no seating. You're just buying a ticket, so it looks like there's seating, but there's actually not. To kind of that stairs seating to get to the top where there isn't access, wheelchair access up there, but individuals, should they be able to. And then you have, you know, just common seating. So you just buy a ticket, seat, sit wherever. So you kind of have different options depending on what it is. Most of the options are the seat you book is the seat you sit in. At which point, you know, the accessible seating now, and saying that I did bring, I believe it was November, the chair covers. So I am still looking into those chair covers. They're blue. They have the pictorials, and we call them for people with disabilities. And they're the blue chair covers with the white pictorials on them that we can place on top of the chairs. So for any of those more communal general seating requirements, they will be available for use. So in cases like your example, Joanne, you know, just like the TTC and other places, you know, the blue chair, and very similar seating. I think it's known that if someone's using those seats and the need is there, they will get up and move. But also gives us the flexibility.
Down there, and it really works well for them. So it's amazing. It really works well. So
it also gives us the flexibility to use them outdoors. So Rip Fest, for example, or concerts in the park and things like that, right? It gives us that flexibility to expand our accessible seating to beyond just the performance. So I am currently working on that. We're almost finalized with the design, just the technical stuff, and then it's going to go out for purchase shortly, hopefully.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the committee. Greg, I think I'm going to need to speak to you about a few things to catch up. Does anyone have any new business? Seeing, sorry. We have to.
Sure.
I'm sorry, we have to vote on receiving this. So we've already got the mover and the seconder. So I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Informational items, none. I'm sorry, does somebody have new business? No. Okay. So a motion to adjourn. I shouldn't have. Yeah. Thank you, Allison. Who hasn't? Okay, John. All those in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Now, is this? We're finished.